So today we're digging into a fascinating study that asks a really big question. Could Montreal become a global hub for artificial intelligence? But here's the twist. Not by inventing new algorithms, but by building the actual physical foundation that AI runs on. Let's get into it.
And this really is the central question, isn't it? We always hear about AI living in the cloud, right? But that cloud isn't some fluffy thing up in the sky. It's physical. It's made of servers inside buildings. And it turns out the insane demands of modern AI have completely rewritten the rules for how you build those data centers.
You know, it all comes down to the hardware. For decades, the internet basically ran on CPUs, the standard processors in our computers. But the AI revolution, it runs on something totally different, GPUs, or graphics processing units. These things are parallel computing powerhouses, and they're built for the massive calculations AI needs. And that one single change has enormous consequences.
And we're not just talking about a simple upgrade here. This shift from CPU to GPU, it marks a whole new era for data. It changes absolutely everything. The business model, the costs, the physical challenges, and, of course, the opportunities. So this hardware revolution brings a whole new set of problems. And that subtitle really says it all. Things are getting bigger, hotter, and way, way more expensive.
Okay, let's start with the cost. And get this, that number you see, that's not for a whole data center, it's not even for a full rack of servers. That's the potential price tag for a single AI server packed with GPUs. The kind of cash you need just to get in the game is, well, it's just staggering. And with that crazy cost comes insane power consumption. A single one of these AI servers can slurp up to 10 kilowatts of power. That's as much of an entire rack of the older CPU servers. And this right here is exactly where Montreal's secret weapon comes into play. It's access to stable, super cheap hydroelectricity. That is a total game changer. So what happens when you cram all that expensive, power-hungry tech into a tiny space? You get heat, a ton of it. The study calls it infernal density, which is just perfect. We're talking 50, even 100 kilowatts of heat just pouring out of a single server cabinet. Your standard AC unit? Forget it. It can't even touch that. You need industrial-grade direct liquid cooling, which, you guessed it, is another huge expense. Okay, so with these insane costs and technical challenges, you've got to be asking, how is this even a viable business? Well, this is where the whole strategy flips on its head. Because the real advantage here isn't just about raw computing power. It's about location, security, and control. It's all about something called data sovereignty.
Now, the core idea here is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Data sovereignty just means that if your data is physically stored in, say, Canada, it's subject to Canadian laws. And for a very specific type of client, this isn't just a nice little feature, it's an absolute deal breaker. So who are these clients? Well, we're talking about the highest stakes you can imagine. Think about it. Banks have to comply with strict financial regulations, government agencies, the military, our healthcare systems. They are often legally forbidden from letting their most sensitive data leave the country. For them, a Canadian data center isn't just an option, it's the only option. And this is the key insight, really. By guaranteeing data sovereignty, a hosting company totally transforms its role. You're no longer just renting out space and power like a landlord. You become an indispensable strategic partner, someone who's trusted to protect a nation's most valuable secrets. So, with that huge advantage in mind, the study lays out 4 different paths this company could take. And these scenarios scaled up dramatically, from a small-time reseller all the way to, well, a massive nation-building enterprise. So let's break this down. You've got scenario A, which is a pretty simple reseller model. B is more of a niche software service. C, well, that's a bigger investment in the physical gear. But scenario D, that's the big one. That's the real prize. It requires over $5 million just to get off the ground. And the goal is to build this totally integrated model that combines that sovereign hardware with sovereign software.
And it's this grand plan, this scenario D, that the study really zeroes in on. It's identified as the only strategic path to actually win those huge high-value government and financial contracts. This is definitely the go big or go home option.
So what makes this model so powerful? It's this hybrid approach. It's not just hardware as a service, providing the secure physical servers. It's also software as a service, giving clients trusted Canadian-built software to analyze their data right there on that secure hardware. It's a complete, secure, totally locked-down ecosystem from top to bottom. All right, so where does that $5 million+ actually go?
Well, first, you have to buy that incredibly expensive GPU hardware we talked about. Second, you build out the physical infrastructure to power and cool the whole thing. Third, and this is crucial, you get all the critical national security certifications. And finally, you fund the top-tier R&D team you need to build that sovereign software.
Now, the plan is also refreshingly honest about its own risks. The strengths? They're totally unique. You've got that sovereign advantage and multiple streams of revenue. But the weaknesses are pretty scary too. A massive upfront cost and the incredibly long sales cycles you have to endure to land one of those huge government contracts.
And when you look at the external factors, the opportunity is just massive. I mean, a chance to become a national champion, right? A Canadian equivalent to a company like Palantir, maybe even with some public funding. But the threats are just as real. Tech can become obsolete almost overnight, and you're up against fierce competition from established global software giants.
Ultimately, the whole analysis boils down to this one powerful takeaway. If you're targeting the high-value market, government, finance, defense, a piecemeal approach just won't cut it. The only way to win, the only strategic path forward, is to build a complete, integrated, and sovereign digital fortress.
And this leaves us with a final, really fascinating question to think about. We always say data is the world's most valuable resource, but we tend to think of it as this abstract thing. This whole plan is a powerful reminder that data has a physical home. And in an age of AI and intense global competition, maybe, just maybe, the building that secures a nation's data is actually its most critical piece of infrastructure.